8 months ago, Mom asked me to come over for coffee. Nothing unusual there. We had our weekly coffee chats ever since I moved back home to help care for her, but this time was different. She waited until I was mid-sip before casually mentioning her diagnosis. Stage 4, she said, stirring her coffee like she was talking about the weather. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Before I could process it, she pulled out a folder. But that's not why I asked you here, James. I remember staring at her hands. They were steady while mine shook so bad I had to put my cup down. She started talking about the house, about Elijah, my older brother, about her concerns. See, Elijah had always been the successful one at laid on paper, but Mom, she saw right through him. Elijah will sell this house the moment he can. She said, her voice matter of fact. He's underwater on his condo and I've seen his credit card statements. She pushed the folder toward me. I want you to buy it. Fair market value, everything legal and proper. I tried to argue. It felt wrong talking about the house while she was telling me she was dying. But Mom had always been 10 steps ahead of everyone else. I've already talked to William, she said, referring to our family lawyer. He's drawn up the paperwork. I'm selling it to you at market rate, no special deals. You can afford it with your savings and what you make. I know you love this house, James. You're the only one who ever did. She was right. I'd moved back 3 years ago when she first started getting sick, working remotely from my old bedroom. Elijah visited maybe twice a year, always with grand stories about his latest deals and how well he was doing. Mom would smile and nod, but she kept all the important papers in her room locked away from him. The sale went through quietly. Mom and I agreed not to tell anyone. She didn't want drama in her final months. We just carried on as usual, me working from home, helping her with appointments, Elijah calling occasionally to boast about his latest achievements. Mom passed 2 weeks ago. The funeral was hard, but what came after was worse. Elijah showed up at the house the next day with a notepad, already measuring rooms and talking about how he'd modernize the place. He didn't even wait for the will reading. This old kitchen has to go, he declared yesterday, running his hand along the tile countertop Mom and I had installed together last summer. And your room? Sorry, little brother, but I'm thinking home gym. You'll need to find your own place. I sat there at the kitchen island Mom and I used to share coffee at, watching him plan the destruction of our home. Then he said it. The words that made me decide to finally reveal the truth. Let's be honest, James, you're too lazy to deserve this house. Living with Mom all this time, working from home in your pajamas, that's not a real job. I'm doing you a favor, forcing you to finally grow up. He didn't notice how my hands had stopped shaking, didn't see the small smile I couldn't quite hide. You see, the will reading is tomorrow. Elijah thinks he's about to inherit everything. The house, Mom's savings, all of it. He has no idea that the house isn't even part of the estate anymore. Mom left him some money, sure, but the house has been mine for months. I have the paperwork in my desk drawer upstairs, right next to the eviction notice William helped me draft last week. I'm sitting in the kitchen now, drinking coffee from Mom's favorite mug, listening to Elijah in the living room as he talks loudly on his phone about his renovation plans. He's talking about knocking down the wall with Mom's hand-painted flowers on it. Tomorrow, everything changes. For now, I'm just going to sit here and enjoy my coffee. Mom always said revenge is best served cold. Update first, thank you all for the overwhelming support on my last post. A lot has happened in the past 2 days and not much of it good. Remember how I mentioned Elijah was making renovation plans? Well, he didn't waste any time getting started, without asking anyone's permission, of course. I woke up yesterday morning to the sound of a truck backing into our driveway. At first, I thought it might be a delivery, but then I heard multiple car doors slamming. By the time I got downstairs, Elijah had let in 3 guys with tool belts who were already measuring the kitchen walls. Oh good, you're up, Elijah said, not even looking up from his phone. You should start packing, these guys need to gut the kitchen by the end of the week. I stood there in my pajamas, coffee mug in hand, watching strangers walk through my house. The thing is, I couldn't say anything yet. The will reading wasn't until later that afternoon, and William, our lawyer, had specifically advised me to wait. Let him show his true colors were his exact words. So I just nodded, went back upstairs and started documenting everything. Photos, videos, timestamps. I even recorded Elijah's voice as he talked about tearing down Mom's hand-painted wall. This flower stuff has gotta go, he said to one of the workers. It's so dated, we're thinking modern, industrial. Around noon, Elijah came up to my room, without knocking, of course. Listen, he said, leaning against my doorframe like he owned the place. I need you to clear out by Sunday. I've got the design team coming Monday and this room needs to be empty. The will reading isn't until 4, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Maybe we should wait, he actually laughed. Come on, James, we both know how this is going to go. Mom always knew I was the only one who could handle the property properly. I mean, what would you even do with a house this size? Hold land parties. While he was talking, I watched him pick up Mom's old music box from my desk, the one she'd given me when I was 10. He turned it over in his hands like he was appraising it for a yard sale. I had to clench my fist to stop myself from grabbing it back. That's when Natalie, our sister, showed up. She'd come early for the will reading and walked into complete chaos. The kitchen was half dismantled, there were strange men walking around, and Elijah was already talking about where to put his new hot tub. What the hell, Elijah, she demanded. We haven't even had the will reading yet, this is still technically Mom's house. Oh please, he waved her off. We all know how this is going to go, I'm just getting a head start. Besides, I'm doing James a favor. He needs to learn to stand on his own feet. Natalie tried to argue with him, but you know how Elijah gets when he thinks he's right. She ended up pulling me aside into Mom's old room. It was the one place Elijah hadn't invaded yet. He'd always been a little afraid of Mom's disapproval, even now. James, she said, looking worried. You need to stand up to him, this isn't right, I almost told her then. But I remembered William's advice about waiting for the official reading. Instead, I just asked her to trust me and to keep taking pictures of everything Elijah was doing. The next few hours were surreal. I watched as they ripped out the kitchen cabinets Mom and I had refinished last spring. Elijah had moved most of my stuff to the garage, including my work setup. He'd even started marking the walls for his vision. But the worst part, he found Mom's recipe box, the one with all her handwritten cards, some from her own mother. I came downstairs to find it in the trash pile. When I fished it out, he rolled his eyes. Seriously, nobody uses paper recipes anymore. Just take pictures if you want to keep them so badly. That's when I made a decision. I went upstairs, got the property deed and ownership papers, and was about to head downstairs to end this whole thing. But then Grandmother Violet called. She's always been the wisest of us all, and when I told her what was happening, she said something that made me pause. Sometimes, James, people need to dig their own holes deep enough that they can't pretend they didn't mean to fall in. So I waited. I documented everything. Every snide comment, every item moved without permission, every change ordered without authority. The will reading is in an hour. But here's the thing that's really getting to me. I just found out what he's planning to do with Mom's garden. Those roses she bobbied for 20 years. He's already called someone to concrete over it for his new outdoor kitchen. They're coming tomorrow morning. The will reading is at 4. It's 3 now. I'm sitting in my car outside William's office, watching Elijah pull up in his fancy car, still on his phone, probably ordering more destruction of my house. He has no idea what's about to happen, but I'm starting to worry that maybe just showing him the deed won't be enough to stop him. You should see the look in his eyes when he talks about his renovation plans, it's like he's possessed. I'll update again after the reading. Something tells me this isn't going to go the way anyone expects. Update 2, thank you all for your support and advice on my previous posts. Something happened at Thanksgiving dinner that I need to share, but first, let me catch you up on the aftermath of the will reading. The past month has been interesting. After Elijah stormed out of William's office, he spent 2 weeks trying to contest everything. He called every lawyer in town, but the no contest clause in Mom's will meant he'd lose his entire inheritance if he pursued it. What he didn't stick around to hear was that Mom had actually set up a trust fund for him. She knew about his financial troubles and tried to help him one last time. I moved back into my house the day after the will reading. The kitchen was half demolished, but at least the contractors stopped work once they realized Elijah had no authority to hire them. I've been sleeping in the living room while repairs are underway. Every morning I drink my coffee and look at Mom's roses through the window, grateful they survived Elijah's renovation plans. Then came Thanksgiving. Grandmother Violet always hosts, it's been that way since before Dad passed. None of us expected Elijah to show up, he hadn't returned any of our calls since the will reading. But at 4 p.m. sharp his car pulled into the driveway. He looked different, designer clothes replaced with a wrinkled button-down, dark circles under his eyes. Natalie later told me he'd been crashing on a friend's couch since his girlfriend kicked him out. He'd apparently been lying to her about owning a house. Grandmother has this rule about leaving drama at the door on holidays. So we all played along, passing dishes, making small talk about the weather. But there was this tension in the air, like everyone was waiting for something to break. It started with the sweet potatoes. Mom's recipe, the one from her recipe box that Elijah had tried to throw away. I'd made them exactly how she used to. These taste just like Mom's. Natalie said, smiling at me, "Yeah, well, some of us actually spent time with her in the kitchen instead of just waiting to cash in." I replied, the words out before I could stop them. The scrape of Elijah's chair against the floor cut through the silence. Is that what you think? His voice was quiet, dangerous, that I was just waiting for her to die. Weren't you? I shot back. You had buyers lined up before we even had the funeral. Grandmother set down her fork. The sound seemed impossibly loud. Elijah, she said, her voice gentle but firm. What buyers? That's when it all spilled out. Elijah had been in talks with developers for months. They were planning to tear down our childhood home and build luxury condos. The renovation plans just for show to increase the property value. You were going to destroy Mom's garden? Natalie's voice cracked. Her roses. The roses weren't paying my debts. Elijah slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. You have no idea what it's like, trying to keep up appearances, trying to be successful. Successful, grandmother interrupted. Her voice was still quiet, but there was steel in it now. Let me tell you about success, Elijah. Your brother worked from home to care for your mother. He learned her recipes, helped with her garden, made her last years comfortable. That's success. He stole my inheritance. He bought that house fairly, grandmother said. Your mother saw what you'd become. She watched you take and take, always assuming everything should be yours by right. Remember the treehouse? I felt my chest tighten at the memory. Summer I was 7, Elijah 10. He declared the treehouse was his property because he was older, kept me out all summer. That was different, Elijah muttered. We were kids, was it? Grandmother's eyes were sad. You've spent your whole life claiming things that weren't yours to claim. The house wasn't stolen from you, Elijah, it was protected from you. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Elijah started laughing, a hollow, bitter sound that made the hair on my neck stand up. Protected? Fine, you want to know the truth. I'm drowning, the condo's underwater. The credit cards are maxed out. I needed that house. The developers offered enough to clear everything, set me up somewhere new, but perfect little James had to ruin it all. He stood up, knocking over his wineglass, red spread across grandmother's white tablecloth like a wound. You think you've won? He was looking at me now, really looking at me for the first time all evening. This isn't over, you have no idea what's coming. The door slammed behind him so hard the family photos rattled on the walls. Through the window, we watched his car fishtail down the driveway, taking out one of grandmother's rose bushes on the way. Natalie helped clean up the wine while grandmother made coffee. Nobody mentioned dessert. As we sat there in the kitchen, the same way we used to sit with Mom, grandmother reached for my hand. He'll be back, she said quietly. Christmas is coming and he's desperate, be careful, she's right. I've already caught him driving past the house late at night. William says the developers are threatening to sue him for promises he had no right to make. His credit cards are maxed out, his girlfriend left, and he blames me for all of it. I should feel victorious, I guess. But sitting here in Mom's garden, looking at her roses in the fading light, all I feel is tired. And worried because grandmother's right. Christmas is coming, and Elijah's always been most dangerous when he has nothing left to lose. Final updates. A week has passed since Christmas Eve, and I've finally processed enough to write this. Grandmother warned me Elijah would try something, but none of us expected this. The week before Christmas was eerily quiet, no threats, no drive-bys, not even a call from him. I should have known better. While I restored Mom's kitchen, undoing the damage from his unauthorized renovations, Elijah was plotting. The only change to the house, a new security system, William's idea. Then on December 23rd, I got an email from one of the developers Elijah had been working with. He'd been forging documents, pretending he owned the house and taking deposits from multiple companies. When they discovered the scam, they threatened legal action. Elijah wasn't just in trouble, he was drowning in it. Christmas Eve morning, I woke to frantic pounding at my door. Elijah stood there, disheveled, wild-eyed, his car packed like he was ready to flee. You have to help me, he begged, pushing inside. They're going to press charges, I'll go to jail. Watching him pace in the kitchen he had once tried to destroy, I barely recognized him. Then I noticed a bulge under his coat. My heart pounded. Was he armed? Carefully, I played along. Let me get my laptop, I said, stepping into Mom's study. Instead, I grabbed my phone and texted Natalie and William our emergency code, Treehouse. Then I returned with Mom's old photo album, buying time. Elijah was at the counter, tracing the hand-painted tiles Mom loved. For a second, I saw a flicker of remorse, but then his hand moved toward his waist. I didn't want to do this, he muttered, voice shaking. But you left me no choice. Before he could act, the front and back doors burst open. Natalie and William swept in, followed by law enforcement. Turns out, William had quietly filed a restraining order after Thanksgiving, just in case. And then the moment that sealed Elijah's fate. When they searched him, there was no gun, just more forged documents. He had planned to force me into signing over the house at gunpoint with a water pistol. And here's the kicker, Elijah could have avoided all of this. Mom had set up a trust fund for him, but he never stayed long enough to hear about it at the will reading. The money would have covered everything. Instead, he chose fraud. As they took him away, he ranted about how Mom always loved me more. That's when Natalie pulled out her phone. She had been recording his confession the entire time. Mom gave you every chance, she said. Even at the end, she tried to help you. You threw it all away. The look on his face when he realized what he had lost, I'll never forget it. That night, grandmother Natalie and I had a quiet Christmas Eve dinner in Mom's restored kitchen. We used her china, made her recipes, and for the first time in years, the house felt whole again. Grandmother showed us an old photo album. Your mother knew this might happen, she said. She wasn't choosing favorites. She was protecting both of you, Elijah from himself and you from Elijah. One photo hit hard, Elijah and me as kids in our treehouse, his arm around me, both of us smiling. I wonder when that brother disappeared. This morning, I signed the house over to Natalie as co-owner. We're turning the garden into a memorial for Mom, expanding her rose collection. A new climbing rose will grow where Elijah once ran over grandmother's flowers, a symbol of resilience. As for Elijah, he's staying with a cousin out of state trying to clean up his mess. His girlfriend sold their story to a local paper. Turns out he had been lying to everyone. The house is quiet now. Natalie and I are restoring Mom's old recipe box, preserving her legacy. Yesterday, we found something unexpected, a letter dated just weeks before she died. Remember, my darlings, a house is made of wood and stone, but a home is built with love and forgiveness. I'm trying to take that to heart. But every time I check the security cameras, I remember how close we came to losing everything she built. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt, but at least the house is safe. Mom's roses are blooming, her kitchen is whole again. And for the first time in a long time, so are the people inside it.